I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. Finding diverse groups of qualified participants for clinical studies can slow the development of needed medicines. The difficulty in attracting racial and ethnic minorities, women, and the elderly also creates concerns that trial results will fail to reflect what would happen in the real world. Some 80% of clinical trials fail to meet enrollment deadlines, and an average of 30% of participants drop out, in part because of the location and duration of these studies. CVS Health in 2021 launched CVS Clinical Trial Services, which capitalizes on CVS's rich database of patients and its large footprint that puts a CVS location within 10 miles of 85% of the U.S. population. We spoke to Owen Garrick, Chief Medical Officer of Clinical Trial Services at CVS Health, about the company's push into clinical trials, the need to expand the diversity of participants in these studies, and how CVS is leveraging its resources to increase access to and participation in clinical trials. Owen, thanks for joining us.
Danny, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about the decentralization of clinical trials, the move of retail pharmacies into clinical trials, and the potential this has to expand diversity of participants in these studies. Let's start with CVS Health and its decision to do this. This in part came about because of the COVID pandemic. Can you explain?
Sure, that's absolutely right, Danny. As we all know, the pandemic started. There was a global effort to develop vaccines, and CVS got involved with recruiting for the vaccine studies here in the U.S. and was pretty successful, and in fact helped recruit a very diverse cohort of individuals to participate. And that got the management team and board thinking about what role should we have and could we have as an organization more broadly in clinical research.
As you think about the case for CVS moving into the clinical trial space, give me a sense of the footprint, the proximity to potential participants, and the resources CVS Health can bring to bear to deliver clinical trial services.
Sure. The mission very broadly is to make clinical trials part of a patient's and consumers' everyday experience. So demystifying it, you talked about decentralization. So if you look at CVS as an organization, we have roughly 10,000, slightly under 10,000 retail locations, and 1,200 of those have Minute Clinics. So CVS, Minute Clinic is a part of CVS, and we are converting those Minute Clinic locations across the country to research sites. So currently we have about 80, and that number will grow through this year and next year. And that's where you can actually conduct, where patients can come in and participate in trials. We set about deciding on where those would be located in a very deliberate fashion. And the two biggest components of that analysis were the ethnic diversity of those locations as well as the economic diversity. So we looked at the entire fleet or footprint of 1,200 locations, and based on the diversity, both economic and racial and ethnic, we looked at our first cohort of, as I mentioned, 80 locations. So if you think about areas such as Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston, DC, Philadelphia, Central New Jersey, very diverse neighborhoods. And that allows for an underrepresented or historically underrepresented group i.e. diverse participants, to participate because our locations are conveniently located within the communities and within their communities.
Prior to joining CVS Health, you were president and CEO of Bridge Clinical Research, a boutique CRO that specialized in diversity research. Why did you decide to join CVS Health in its move into clinical trials? What did you see as the opportunity?
As I thought about making a transition, the work I did at Bridge was really and truly focused on improving health outcomes for diverse communities through research. And I saw CVS as an opportunity to scale that lifelong passion of mine and getting involved at the ground floor with clinical trial services within CVS. I could, with the team, build equity into everything that we do. So if we think about the site footprint, as I've mentioned, if we think through the staff that we're recruiting to participate, which will be diverse and will reflect the community, that was just really and truly compelling. We've made a commitment to and a goal of recruiting 30,000 diverse individuals within a 5-year period. And an organization like CVS has that national footprint and national scale to make that happen. So it was truly an offer and an opportunity that I could not refuse.
What's the need? Why does expanding the diversity of clinical trials matter? And how good or bad a job have trial sponsors been doing?
Sure. So from a medical or biologic perspective, you see differential response to the same drug therapy within ethnic groups or among ethnic groups. Now, part of that is, so what that means, you give someone of different ethnicities a particular drug, and they will respond differently. So some will have an optimal response and some will have a suboptimal response. And part of that is biologic or genetic, and the other part is environmental. From a biologic perspective, there just might be things like how drugs are metabolized. From an environmental perspective, there might be issues such as, if you have diabetes or oncology or cancer rather, that you are diagnosed much later, so you have later a more severe disease. So that combination, from a patient's perspective, you want to make sure that all patients are involved in your clinical trials, so you know that the drug works, or drug works effectively in all populations. And if it doesn't work effectively in all populations, you know that, and you can adjust dosing, you can adjust timing, and you can also, if it's a biologic, identify which markers or receptors are involved and target those more effectively for different populations. So that's the scientific or medical rationale, is really about ensuring that the drugs that we're developing, and not just drugs, but the therapies, the devices, the diagnostics, impact all populations effectively.
There are a number of reasons that are often cited for why there isn't greater participation in clinical trials from traditionally underrepresented communities. As someone who's long worked in trying to address this problem, what's your perspective? What have you heard from participants? And perhaps more telling, what have you heard from people who don't participate?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. And this has been well studied, well characterized. So my sense is we have a good sense of the issues. And there are really three. The first is awareness. So are you aware of what a clinical trial is? And the good thing, if there was a good thing from COVID and the development of the vaccines, is awareness around clinical trials has increased dramatically. But what we still fall short is, from a patient's perspective, understanding and being aware what a clinical trial means for me, as an individual or as a community. So continuing with the work around awareness. The second thing is access. So if I'm aware that a study is happening in my neighborhood or in my community, do I have the ability to participate? Is the location accessible? Do I relate to the people? Are they welcoming? So as I mentioned, that awareness, that second part is access. And as I talked about earlier, the site footprint that is conveniently located in the community, I think affords improved access. These we're not huge academic medical centers where you can get lost and have trouble navigating. And then the third component is trust. And you can look at it both, two ways. One, from a patient perspective, we spend a lot of time thinking about this, is do patients trust the research enterprise and the healthcare community? The other side of that coin is the research enterprise trustworthy? Right? Have we earned the trust of patients and the community? So those are the three things that we see, and as I mentioned, are well characterized in terms of the challenges. If we think about the trust, one of the things we're doing at CVS and Clinical Trial Services is not just having this commitment to the community. So our engagement isn't transactional, but we are really focused on having a long-term relationship, having the staff in the research department that reflects and looks like the community, they're part of the community. So that helps us with the trust barriers.
What are some of the things CVS is doing to draw in diverse populations for clinical studies?
Yeah, so I think there are two big components. The one, as I mentioned, the diverse staff, and we're also reaching out to and I'll pause here. The importance of that is, as we think through what are important research questions, if you have staff and researchers that are connected to the community, they have a sense of what are the important issues that and true problems and challenges that the community is facing, and can develop, based on that, research questions and analyses that would resonate for the community and help solve real problems. That's the first part. The second part is, while CVS is a trusted entity, not everyone is a CVS customer. And so we are engaging with what we call a diversity partner network. And these could be healthcare entities. They could be entities focused on housing, on financial literacy, that are trusted members of the communities where we have research sites. So we engage with them, inform them, getting back to that awareness issue about what we're doing around research and why, invite them to participate in our research, and also inform, as I mentioned, the research that would be of interest to the community.
CVS fills a lot of prescriptions. I suspect that gives you fairly good insight into patients who might be appropriate for a specific clinical trial. Do you leverage that data in any way for recruitment?
We certainly do, and we do it in a not just HIPAA and regulatory compliant way, but we also think about maintaining the trust that we've built with our patients. So they are clearly interested. They participate. They come to us in terms of pharmacy needs. They trust that we're going to do the right thing with their information. So we have an entire suite and process of ensuring that. And so, yes, we certainly do. And it's not just the actual data, but it's what we're able to do with the data in terms of analytics to not just identify who might be a type 2 diabetes patient, but also if we look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria within a study, who might actually qualify for a particular study. So we have an entire enterprise analytics team that supports us with creating algorithms to identify individuals for a study. So you could, if we think about lupus as an example, or steroids, as an example, someone on steroids could be using it for different reasons. Joint issues, they could be a lupus patient, but there might be 4 or 5 other reasons why someone is on a steroid. We would look at the patient's overall data set to see and create an algorithm to identify they're in fact a lupus patient who might, who happens to be on a steroid versus someone else who might not qualify for a lupus study.
What is CVS Health's capabilities? What's the range of services it can do from a clinical trial perspective?
Sure. So from a recruitment perspective, we have the ability to identify patients for pretty much every therapeutic area. From the perspective of conducting a trial, we have within the Minute Clinic locations, we do phlebotomy, we do EKGs, we do spirometry. So most chronic conditions, cardiovascular conditions, respiratory conditions. We have neurology studies in migraine and Alzheimer's. So fairly broad. If you come into our location, our staff is clinically capable of providing those services. And we also have a home research group that can also do infusions within the home. So the ability to do large molecules such as cancer therapies or targeted therapies, we can actually also do in the home. So it's not just the capability of doing particular service or providing a particular clinical care, but it's the actual, also where. So, and we want to do that in a convenient way for the patient.
You mentioned you can also do it home. How are you leveraging technology to bring the trial to the patient beyond using your footprint? Are you using technology so people can participate at home?
Most certainly. So that's the third leg of the stool. So not only can we have a nurse visit you in the home, but we can, and we have a partnership with a company called Medable, where we can, through their technology, leverage and tap into things such as wearables, devices such as home-based temperature checks, blood pressure checks, weight scales, et cetera, and have that in a research and HIPAA compliant way and secure way become part of the medical record and the research record. So absolutely. So from a tech perspective, and that could, as I mentioned, wearables in the home, it would also and could also include video visits, just like you can go in and visit a clinician for a non-research service via video. And you can also do the same in a research setting.
One of the critical challenges with having multiple clinical trial sites can be consistency in data and the way things are measured and recorded. How much specialized training, if any, is needed for staff to conduct a study, and how is that handled?
Sure. The two biggest components that you want to ensure in research are, one, patient safety, and then two, data quality and integrity. And the beauty of what we offer is that there's one set of systems across our entire platform. So our quality management system supports the regulatory work that we do, the data integrity work that we ensure, the patient safety work, both at the site level, and then we have an entire quality team that supports the work across the national footprint, not just in the trial delivery network, but also in the work we do in terms of identifying and recruiting patients. And we didn't speak a lot about this, but the third component of what we offer is real-world evidence, which is mainly retrospective data analysis, but is also growing to include prospective analyses involving data in a real-world setting. So the training is robust, and it's not just our suite of GCP or good clinical practice training and our SOPs, but our regular quality improvement and process improvement work.
You mentioned the growing interest in real-world evidence. Are you doing this within post-market studies or across the board?
Great. So thus far, has been mainly post-marketing studies. But one of the things we're doing is developing an internal research agenda. So what are some of the key issues that we're interested in evaluating? So we have recruited last year we recruited 20,000 individuals to participate in studies. We reached out to 25 million individuals. So that gets to that awareness component, right? So, and so if we've reached out, I don't know if anyone's ever done that, reached out to 25 million people, right? So internally, we want to think through what were some of the most effective channels, what was the response to us as a retail enterprise reaching out, what was the willingness to participate based on that communication? Did we increase awareness about clinical trials? So the answer to your question is yes, and even more.
How about consent? Do you actually do the consent with patients, or is that done elsewhere?
Yeah, we do. We consent the patients to participate in all the research settings, whether that be in the home. They can do that leveraging technology via e-consent, and they can also come into the research site and engage with our nurse practitioners and PAs. And oftentimes patients, take the consent home, talk to their families about it. We're available to ask questions or to answer questions that they might have. But yes, we conduct IRB approved consents as a regular part of our work and research.
As you think about what CVS has embarked on here, what do you think the potential is to change the way clinical trials are conducted and who participates in them?
I think there's a huge impact, and the impact is at the top of the show. You talked about decentralization, right? So moving research from the large academic medical centers into the community affords this notion of a much more representative group of research participants. And if they're more representative of the individuals that actually have a particular condition, we have much more broadly a sense that these drugs and therapies work effectively. And we can also begin to do some subset analyses to see if there are particular patients where the drug actually works better or might be suboptimized. And how do we then from there do follow-on research to either enhance that optimization or bring up those individuals that were suboptimized on therapy.
Owen Garrick, Chief Medical Officer of Clinical Trial Services at CVS Health. Owen, thanks so much for your time.
Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.